Hi everyone, Aaron here. Happy Sunday and welcome back to the channel. Before I jump into it, if you haven't seen the video I uploaded yesterday about Grant Cardone and how he is defrauding his Cardone Capital investors, I definitely suggest you check it out. And for anyone wondering, because a few have asked in the comments, why do you talk about Grant Cardone? What does that have to do with Scientology? Grant Cardone is one of Scientology's biggest financial supporters. He has also been a very effective recruiter, getting people to join Scientology. Anyone, particularly if someone's got a high profile, who's out there publicly encouraging people to join a human trafficking cult that destroys families and bankrupts its members, is certainly somebody I'm going to set my sights on. And when you add on top of that the fact that Cardone also happens to be a fraudster who has raised hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions at this point, from unaccredited, unsophisticated investors with lies and false promises, and he's literally stealing money from his investors. It just gives me all the more reason to set my sights on Grant Cardone. So if you haven't checked it out, highly recommend it. I'll put a link to it up above. The update that we have today is in the Baxter versus Scientology lawsuit. This is one of 3 civil cases that Scientology is currently facing. There are also 2 criminal cases involving Scientologists, one of which is Danny Masterson that I've reported on, and there's another one that I haven't even yet spoken about, but I'm still saving that for another video. So the Baxter versus Scientology lawsuit has to do with 3 former Scientologists, specifically former Sea Org members, who are alleging that they were trafficked for labor as children on Scientology's cruise ship called the Freewinds. I spoke about this case in a video earlier this week about how David Miscavige has been avoiding personal service in the case, but this update is about another aspect of it. Now, I know many of you watching are already familiar, but let me quickly explain again that Scientologists all sign legal documents signing away their rights to ever sue Scientology for any reason at any time. And whereas that sounds, I'm sure, ridiculous to all of you, the fact that these documents are signed by Scientologists, and in some cases are signed many, many, many times. In fact, in all cases, they're signed many times. This has served as a very difficult hurdle for lawsuits to get past when we're talking about former Scientologists suing Scientology for things that happened to them while they were still in Scientology. What makes this specific case of Baxter versus Scientology unique and particularly problematic for Scientology is that all 3 plaintiffs in the case are suing with respect to a period of time that occurred when all 3 of them were still minors and therefore were legally incapable of entering into any contractual agreement or obligation. So these 3 plaintiffs, they filed this suit in April of this year. They are suing technically six different entities. There's 5 Scientology-related corporations that are listed as defendants in the lawsuit, and then David Miscavige is named personally. So in July, all of the entities who had accepted service, David Miscavige is still avoiding service in the case, so he's not technically involved in the case yet. But the 5 institutions, the 5 Scientology-related organizations, all filed motions in the case asking the judge to throw this case out of the courts and move it into Scientology's internal arbitration process. On August 2nd, the plaintiffs responded with, instead of directly responding to those motions, they filed an amended initial complaint providing additional information since the plaintiffs were essentially refiling their initial complaint but with amendments. Scientology on August 23rd, all the 5 Scientology entities refiled their motions to get the judge to throw this out of the courts and to move it into Scientology arbitration. Now, again, remember, these 5 entities, they're all interrelated Scientology organizations, and their filings all refer to each other. Like one organization's filings refers to the other organizations, and the filings are quite substantial. They're very long. So the plaintiff's attorneys asked the court for permission to, instead of responding to each of the 5 motions individually, to be able to respond to all 5 of them with a single comprehensive consolidated response. And the update is that on Friday, the judge responded to this request by saying, "Denied. You have to respond individually to every one of the 5 motions. The plaintiff's attorneys, I think on the one hand, I think they were trying to give themselves as much time as possible to put a good response together. It's easier to put together and faster to put together one response than it is to put together 5. And since the rationale seemed reasonable, the negative interpretation would simply be that that it looks like, I don't want to overstate it, but antagonistic behavior on behalf of the judge, where he isn't acting in a friendly manner towards the plaintiffs or their attorneys or their cause. Another thought on that would be, well, a judge isn't supposed to really be looking friendly or favorably or kindly on anyone. Really, he's there to be an unbiased participant or referee in this activity. One factor that contributes to some leaning towards a negative interpretation, a cynical interpretation of these developments, is that in this very courtroom, a different judge, not the current judge for this case is Judge Thomas Barber in a Florida federal court here in Tampa. But in an earlier case, different judge, same courtroom, a judge made a ruling on this arbitration issue that went in Scientology's favor, although the facts of that case were completely different. The earlier suit had to do with a financial issue, it had to do with requesting refunds, and it had to do with someone who was a consenting adult of legal age who signed the arbitration agreement. So perhaps the facts of that case were a little more cut and dry. Again, it has no bearing on this case, but it does give some people some cause for concern that, perhaps especially in Scientology's right in the backyard of their largest organization where they throw around tons of money to try and buy influence. Scientology hires the best lawyers. They hire very influential former judges to lobby for them. So whenever something's happening right in Scientology's backyard, I think there's a tendency to think that it's going in Scientology's favor. But the positive interpretation of these developments would be that the judge is planning on denying Scientology's motion, the motion to compel this case to be thrown into arbitration, that he's planning on denying the motion and is doing everything in his power to prevent Scientology from giving Scientology ammunition that they could use on appeal. So if the judge were to give the plaintiffs and their attorneys some leeway and to make an exception for them at this moment in time, that might give Scientology additional ammunition to appeal. And so that would be, I got to tell you, that is the interpretation that is my favorite. I kind of love the idea that the judge would be sitting there going, hey, you guys, I am about to find in your favor. And so help me help you. Stop asking me to change the rules for you. Get down to business, put in some overtime, respond to each one of these motions individually. Help me help you. That is my favorite interpretation, and that is the one I am going with for now. As soon as we hear more on this, I will let you guys know. All right, everyone, that's all I have on this for now. Thank you for watching. Thank you to all of you who watched until the very end, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not,